Thank you so much, sir, for those very kind words. Thanks to the chairperson, to the august audience, and thanks to the organizers for having me here and asking me to talk about hypercortisolism in type 2 diabetes, which is defined as excessive tissue exposure to glucocorticoids. And if we move on from the ominous octet to fancy terms like dirty dozen, treacherous 13, faithless 14, so the noxious 9 is the hypercortisolism. And there is a HPA axis which we already are aware of. Hypothalamus produces CRH, which acts on the anterior pituitary to produce ACTH, and which in turn acts on the adrenal glands to produce cortisol. Apart from that, the activation of HPA axis is also associated with release of catecholamines and inflammatory mediators. And during states of stress, the cortisol's ability to negatively suppress the ACTH and CRH are suppressed. So there is a tonic elevation of the HPA axis. So with this brief preamble, I'm going to start off with the topic proper. First of all, I would be talking to you briefly about the glucocorticoid effect on glucose metabolism in liver. It promotes the gluconeogenesis by stimulating the PEP carboxykinase. It suppresses the glycogen synthase. It stimulates the phosphorylase, which is essential for glycogen breakdown. Muscle, it reduces the glucose uptake. It induces insulin resistance by antagonizing the action of IRS1, PI3 kinase, and the protein kinase B. Adipose tissue, there is a decreased uptake of glucose and induction of lipolysis, and the proteolysis induced formation of amino acids and free fatty acids form the substrate for gluconeogenesis. There is increased accumulation of visceral fat. There is a suppression of beta cell function as well. So if you look at the types of hypercortisolism, clinically hypercortisolism is the one which is known as Cushing syndrome, which is known to cause hypertension, diabetes, and osteoporosis. And there is this subclinical variety of hypercortisolism which is also labeled as mild hypercortisolism or HID-HYCO. There is hidden hypercortisolism, where there is a biochemical evidence of hypercortisolism, but we do not find typical catabolic features, predominantly found in people uncontrolled diabetes, uncontrolled hypertension, or diabetes associated with unusual increase in bone fragility. And if you look at the comparison between the Cushing syndrome and mild hypercortisolism, in Cushing syndrome, the predominant etiology lies in the pituitary, therefore it is ACTH dependent, whereas the mild hypercortisolism, the reason lies in adrenal gland, it is ACTH independent in around 85 to 90% cases. And look at the prevalence. 0.8 to 2 by 1000 in HID-HYCO versus 1 in 5 lakh in Cushing syndrome. And the typical catabolic features, those are the easy bruising, facial plethora, proximal myopathy, stria, all those would be absent in HID-HYCO cases. So what about the epidemiological evidence? It is stated that in newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes, it is found in around 5.2% of cases. And if you be a bit selective, that I'm going to tell you later, it would be jumping to 8.4 to 10.2%. There is a HPA axis in activation, but the debate is still on whether the cortisol is directly linked to occurrence of microvascular complications or not. As we already talked about, 10 to 15% of the people having diabetes would go on to have stress, and this is associated with neurometabolic, endocrine, and immunological changes. And you would see that there is a HPA axis activation, autonomous nervous system activation, inflammation. There are two more points coming into the picture. There is an increase in 11 beta HSD1, which gives rise to conversion of inactive cortisone to cortisol, and there is also an increase in glucocorticoid receptor sensitivity as well. Mechanistic pathways, we already talked about how it affects the glucose metabolism. There is also increase in glucagon secretion from the usage of the glucocorticoids. In short term, they reduce the calcium mediated insulin exocytosis. They reduce the impact of incretin on the insulin. On long term, they also give rise to apoptosis of beta cells. There is also reduction of uncarboxylated osteocalcin, giving rise to osteoporosis as well. In muscles, you can see there is a reduction in amino acid uptake, reduction in IGF-1, and stimulation of myostatin, inhibition of myogenin. There are a number of ways to suggest how the catabolism is enhanced. Not only that, the hypercortisolism is associated with the increase in global CV events and reduction of CV survival. This is the most important aspect. What clinical evidences do we have to suggest that hypercortisolism indeed is a factor towards causation of diabetes? This is a study on 107 patients, where patients with type 2 diabetes with or without microvascular complications were compared, and you would see that overall the type 2 prevalence of hypercortisolism was 6.3%. In complications, it was 10.5%. Without complications, it was only 2%. And it was significantly associated with increase in inflammatory markers as well. This is a meta-analysis of 14 studies, a total of 2,827 patients, and the pooled prevalence of hypercortisolism was 3.4%, and the Cushing syndrome was 1.4%. Adrenal tumor, you can see the prevalence is 52% versus 14% of patients having Cushing syndrome. This article is something which is asking us to suspect hypercortisolism in few of the cases. 30 years or older, 6 studies were included, and they have labeled a term called advanced type 2 diabetes, which is defined as diabetes having macrovascular complications, insulin treatment plus hypertension, insulin treatment plus dyslipidemia, or hypertension receiving more than equal to 2 drugs. These are the cases where the presence of hypercortisolism is more, and this sums up with advanced diabetes. There is 3.5 times more chances of having hypercortisolism. If you have only diabetes and hypertension, there would be 2 times more likelihood of diagnosing hypercortisolism. The predominant crux of this presentation is the Catalyst study done in around more than 1,000 patients, and they were trying to find the hypercortisolism in type 2 diabetic patients defined by 1 milligram ONDST of more than 1.8 microgram per deciliter. They were also trying to look at the prevalence of adrenal abnormality on the CT scan, and you can see the definition of difficult to treat diabetes. Those were the people who were included: 3 or more type 2 diabetes medications, insulin and other type 2 diabetes medication, 2 or more type 2 diabetes medication with more than equal to 1 vascular complication, 2 or more type 2 diabetes medication with 2 or more hypertension medication. And surprisingly, 1 in 4 patient had hypercortisolism, around 24%, and you would see that 23% of them would be having unilateral adrenal adenoma, which are cases susceptible to surgery. And apart from that, you can see bilateral adenoma, unilateral or bilateral adrenal hyperplasia. And now coming to the factors which would point towards higher chances of hypercortisolism, the ones who are using more than equal to 2 AHAs plus more than equal to 2 antihypertensive, more than equal to 2 antihyperglycemic medications, and more than equal to 1 vascular complication. And the ones who were using the newer class of drugs, tirzepatide, SGLT2 inhibitors, the combination of glutide and gliflozin, the combination of insulin plus the gliflozin, and more number of drugs the patient is on, more likelihood of having hypercortisolism. And if you look at other criteria as well, if the patient is using more number of drugs for hypertension, lipids, cardiovascular conditions, psychiatric use issues, he is more likely to have hypercortisolism. And you can see the persons who are using more than equal to 3 antihypertensive drugs, 35% of them would go on to have hypercortisolism. So this is the summary of the study where people should be subjected to hypercortisolism. Young age diabetes, no family history, poor control, treatment resistant. Hypertension, young age onset, recent changes, very rapid upswing, treatment resistance, low bone mass or fragility fractures, adrenal incidental mass, and one who is having also hyperandrogenic features like hirsutism and acne. How do we screen? Give 1 milligram of dexamethasone at the night 11 p.m. Morning 7 a.m. you are supposed to take fasting cortisol. If it is more than 1.8 microgram per deciliter, you can roughly say that this is a case of hypercortisolism. Now that we have understood who are the patients to be screened, do we have any therapeutic aspects? So these are the things which can be used therapeutically. The ones which can inhibit the synthesis, metyropon, mitoten, ketoconazole, then oscillodostat and GC receptor antagonist, mifepristone, and selective glucocorticoid receptor modulator, relacorilant and bacrococrad. There are few studies to suggest this, and this is the Catalyst Part 2 study, where which is being conducted now. 136 patients from the Catalyst Part 1 have enrolled themselves, and they would be subjected to 24 weeks course of mifepristone to understand its impact on HbA1c, and the long-term follow-up would be done subsequently. To summarize, we have newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes. We will have around 5 to 10% people having hypercortisolism. If it's a difficult to treat type 2 diabetes, the prevalence can go up to 24%. If the person is having using more than equal to 3 antihypertensive drugs, the prevalence jumps up to 35%. And if the patient is having the chances of having adenoadenoma is around 24%. So we cannot neglect it. We have to suspect presence of hypercortisolism in this select group of patients. And though we do not know about the therapeutic implications, Catalyst Part 2 definitely shows the. Thank you all for the patient listening.